I don't know if you folks have been paying attention, but there's a lot of new stories coming out, and really episode after episode about a documentary, if you will, about the war that's happening right now in the Ukraine. They have various reporters who are going, to the front line, and they're also back in families' homes, and they're in the basements of some of these very large buildings, which now, are holding anywhere between 100 to 400 people who gather, especially during the missiles and the striking, all that's happening. And they're sort of trying to give a perspective to the rest of the world, to all of us, about what is happening there. And it is really gruesome to see some of the pictures, some of the photos, Roman soldiers who have been left behind, who have been killed, who are just left on the ground. The Russians are not taking back their dead. They're sort of leaving them there, and it's the Ukrainians that are coming along and burying them because Zelensky has asked them to not leave them in the street, to give them a proper burial so that they have a place to go. They, show all the victims, women and children, and the knocking down of buildings and all. And part of these documentaries now are very close conversation with a lot of the people, and sort of catching them in various positions, and whether on the street or in these buildings, like I was sharing and talking to them. And there was something that an individual said that really sort of shocked me, or caught my attention. It really sort of inspired me, to tell you the truth. He says, we're not a revolt, He says, revolt would include, violence for the sake of violence sake. He says what we are as a people, as a Ukrainian people right now, is a revolution. He says what happens when someone else comes in and is uninvitingly taking your territory, they are also taking part of your history, of your culture. Our purpose as revolutionaries is to make sure that who we are, our ability, our right to exist as a people, as a culture, survives anything that may come our way. And that whole concept about revolution really sort of struck me. He says, they think that they're damaging buildings. And he says, they are. He says what they don't understand is that for the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are hiding in basements and in makeshift, shelters, he says all they're doing is strengthening our resolve to be Ukrainians, to be solidly who we are as a culture, and to do everything we have to do, even lay down our lives, to preserve that. And as he was speaking and as he was saying that, I could not help that, this past Thursday, we celebrated Ascension Thursday. It is 40 days after Jesus raises from the dead and ascends into heaven. He takes his disciples out to a mountain, and then Jesus ascends into heaven, body and soul, into heaven, and body and divinity into heaven. And it is interesting to wonder what Jesus was thinking, as he was giving his blessing and as he was leaving. Jesus, for all practical purposes, has left us a revolution. He has left us a very specific culture. He has left us very specific ideals. He has left us very specific values and very specific directives that if we are going to be a follower of Jesus, that our lives, our communities should gather in such a way to understand that we would do anything to make sure this Jesus revolution doesn't die out. That we are actually empowered now after his ascension, and of course next Sunday is Pentecost, descending of the Holy Spirit upon the church, the establishment, if you will, of the Christian church in all of its forms across the planet. He is engaging and challenging us to make sure that we are actually going to live up to what it is that he wants, because we are the ones as a Christian revolution that should be pushing back against evil and hatred in our world. That we're really that front line. We're meant to be. We're meant to be the front line of love and goodness and generosity, compassion and mercy, standing up against everything else that is in the world. We're meant to literally be in a type of war. And I know it's a language, and we use language like first line and first line defenses and front line, and we get very uncomfortable with that because it's a reality in our world in so many places where there is a war. But I think in some regards, Jesus's hope is that we are defending his values, his teachings, his love in such a profound way that we too are making sure that no one is going to strip that from who and what we are. And yet at the same time, I wonder how much we actually discuss that. And when we are gathered as a community, are we really open to understanding that what we're here for is not to appreciate the service, it's not even to appreciate the scriptures or the sacrament, but really more so, it is about us learning and encountering Jesus in such a way that when we leave this place, we are empowered with hope and strength and courage, that when we're outside these walls, that we act in a way that we have been taught inside these walls. This weekend, friends, we have never really spent a lot of time with them, but we got this very nice invitation to attend an event for their little girl. And the event was taking place in a sacred space. And so we were there, and the one who is presiding at the service is going through the motions, and the service was really very nice. I mean, his preaching, from my perspective, was spot on. It was simple, to the point, made a great, address, to those who were participating, and then, celebrated the sacrament, and then, afterwards, it was just so sad. It was going so well until he ends up saying, and all of you who are participated in this event today, you have brought out all these other people who probably haven't been in church in a really long time. And there's this part inside of me that just sort of groaned. You were doing so well. Why did you have to do the guilt trip? Why couldn't you have just been inviting, that perhaps this is a renewal for all of us, that we're in this sacred space, and perhaps you've been touched by Jesus here, and this is something you'd want to continue. The other thing that was kind of weird, if you will, about the conversation, and about his comment, well, quite honestly, he would never see Donna, Arthur, or I. We don't live anywhere near that place. You know how hard it was to find that place? So it's not like we would have been going there in the first place. So you're making a statement to a group of people that probably half of us have never been and probably will never go back, to that place, because there's no cause or reason. You're sort of making this judgment call. And I just kept wondering, why is it that instead of us simply accepting that the role of the church and the role of we who minister is really to encourage all of us to become more connected to Jesus and to fall in love with God, and that love experience we have, then to take that out and share that. Why is it that we are so quick at trying to put one another down? Because, the person who was being interviewed about the Ukrainian situation and where they were, when they were all gathered together, there was no one taking shots at someone else. They were all in that together. They were all gathered in that space. And because they were all gathered in that space and they all bore the name or the title or the culture Ukrainian, there was a connectedness there. So there was no one pointing out something else, and it seemed to me that that was the foundations of a real revolution. You're all sort of in this together, and you know whether or not you've seen this person or not, the fact that they have entered your shelter in the very same ways, I think for us, we should be as a Christian church. A church meaning basically that we are a place where believers in Jesus come together. We should be inspired to continue the revolution. We should be inspired to continue pushing that the values of Jesus are implemented in and through us. And the reason it's implemented in and through us is because we've experienced it for ourselves, and therefore we could share with others. But for some reason yesterday, he was doing so well. And then it came up to that point, and, I didn't say anything, I didn't say a word, I left it alone. I didn't even turn, I remember closing my eyes going, why? Why? You were doing so well. And if you would have just said to people, whatever has brought you here today, whichever loved one you're here to support, perhaps you've encountered something, and if so, stay at it, and go forth. The other thing that happened in there that was before it, which I was a little bit easier to let go of, but here's language, and I think language is important. The intercessions, the prayers of the people that they were offering up to God, which is part of the structure of their celebration, said that that those who are participating in the event should fall in love with the service and with the sacrament. And I was thinking to myself, and everyone says, she says, let us pray to the Lord, and the whole congregation says, Lord, hear our prayer. And I'm thinking to myself, no, it's the cart before the horse. You need to fall in love with Jesus first, and then that draws you to this. It draws you to a community. And you come to the community to be fed and to be supported and to be guided, but it's not that the first thing we should be doing is just about this. It has to be something so much deeper than that. And so I want us to come away this week with this concept and this idea of a revolution. I want us to consider that being Christian really means that we hold to certain values, to a certain culture, that we follow a leader. And the leader has taught us and guided us and directed us. And therefore, we as a people, as the Christian people, will stand side by side and together use our weapon of love to transform and to change and to push back evil and hatred and greed and selfishness and all those things that we see in the real world. We encounter it every day, but somehow I'm not sure we understand that as Jesus leaves, the mission continues with us. That what he has done, what he has established is the starting point, and we have an amazingly strong foundation. We have amazingly strong footing to move forward, but ultimately the transformation of this world has to be us. And the only way that happens is by a revolution, which means that we simply all agree that we are going to try to be a little bit more loving today than we were yesterday. And is that easy? Absolutely not. Is it easy to go out and when the person cuts you off, doing 700 miles down the hutch for some reason, I don't know where they think they're going to get at 700 miles an hour compared to, 45, but they feel that they need to get there in a rush, and so they're willing to practically kill everybody else. And you can't tell me that when they do that, there's not all these things that pop into your mind about things you want to say and do, to that person. And that's just one thing. We could go through our work day, we could go through our school day, we could go through just our everyday existence, and there are plenty of choices you and I have to make. Our revolution in Jesus Christ, our revolution of love founded by Jesus, should be the centerpiece of who and what we are. We cannot complain about the world that we're living in unless we are part of the solution of the world that we live in. That is left to you and I. And those are real choices. And it starts with the little stuff, honestly. It doesn't need to be these big things. I'm not talking about trying to feed the entire world, which quite honestly we should be doing. I don't understand why we're not doing that. But the fact is, I'm even talking about major events. I'm talking about simple things where every single day, in every single one of our encounters, even if it's simply a smile and recognizing someone else. I walked into the store the other day, and well, you all know me. I'm obnoxious, right? I can't help myself, And I'm walking in, and there's this woman, with her head down, and and I said, "Hi, how's your day going?" Just passing by, And she never answered me, by the way. She's probably still stunned that I talked to her, but it ended up, it put a smile on her face because someone recognized her. That simple. All of us. Is it really that simple to simply recognize one another? Is that the starting point? I get the impression with Jesus, no one went unrecognized. I think everyone who was anywhere near him, Jesus was paying attention to who and what they are, and who they were in relationship and in distance to him. Can it be that simple that a revolution of love starts by simply beginning to recognize the love that God has already instilled in each and every one of us, and recognizing that same love God has for that person, and so we begin to recognize that person because Jesus does. God bless you.